Good afternoon, everyone. It is so great to have you back here again for another episode of Get to Know Them. Welcome to the show. For those of you who have not seen the show before, this is an online talk show where I bring on some of my most favorite people to share their stories with you in hopes that they will inspire you, and we'll just have a great conversation together for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So very, very happy to have you here. Before I get started, I did want to talk about our show sponsors. And our first show sponsor is an amazing Canadian jewelry designer. Sorry, jewelry designer. That's me. Clothing designer. Her name is Brenda Bedome, and I'm wearing her jacket today over my Led Zeppelin t-shirt. I had to have something with guitars on for my guest today. And I'm also wearing Brenda's black denim jeans. If you follow me on social media, you can see a photo of them there. Make sure to check out her website. It's brendabedome.com. Use the coupon code Get to Know Them, and you'll get 22% off of your order. Next sponsor is my business. I'm a jewelry designer, and my business is Glam Jewels. So I'm wearing one of my necklaces, my earrings, and a very special bracelet that we have created to help raise money for a family suffering from the financial burdens of cancer. This is our very special Three Little Wishes bracelet. So make sure you go over to Glam Jewels, GLAMJULZ.com. Check out our jewels and get yourself something lovely for Valentine's. Thanks so much, everyone. I am very, very excited to introduce our guest today. Before I bring her on, I'm going to read her bio to you. I want you to meet Rose Cora Perry. Rose is the former frontwoman of major label signed act Anti-Hero and has performed at some of the world's most renowned music festivals, including Summer NAMM, Canadian Music Week, North by Northeast, Pittsburgh's Three Rivers Regatta, Warped Tour, and Minifest NYC. Rose has crowned a well-respected and Sorry, I'm reading too fast. Rose has been a crowned, well-respected industry pro and has been named one of the top 10 talents in Canada. She was invited to attend the 53rd Annual Grammy Awards in Los Angeles as an honorary special guest artist. She's performed the national anthem at Budweiser Gardens, graced the covers of top magazines, achieved top 30 radio singles, conducted numerous guest lectures, served as a voting committee member for the Jack Richardson Music Awards, and was elected to represent the voice of the independent musician in a 3-month expose for Canadian musician. In 2010, Rose launched her critically acclaimed debut solo album, Off of the Pages, and its associated non-for-profit foundation, Music Saves, which aims to impart onto troubled youth the healing capacity of music. 2016 marked the triumphant return of Rose's musical efforts with the critically acclaimed worldwide release of her sophomore solo album, Onto the Floor. In conjunction with the album's release, Perry formed her high-energy powerhouse duo, The Truth Untold, featuring the exceptional talent of Tyler Randall on drums. Rose handles vocals, guitar, and songwriting. GTA bassist Carmen North joins the band on live tour. We've actually interviewed Carmen on the show. You may have seen that interview. The Truth Untold conquered audiences of 25,000 plus, performing as at notable festivals and winning over crowds of 20-somethings and baby boomers alike. Who is ready to rock today? Let's bring on the amazing Rose Cora Perry. Hi!
Sorry that my bio is so wordy and there was some
Oh,
stumbling blocks there in the phrasing.
it's okay. I love your bio. And I was going to ask you, Rose, I'm reading it. I changed where you had given me the bio and it refers to you as Perry, and then I changed it to Rose, and I noticed I missed a couple. But do you go by Rose Cora or do you go by Rose?
So it's funny, that's a
What?
common question for me, and I didn't realize
Yes.
having a middle name was so complicated for people. Apparently it is. So I'm Rose, like the flower. I don't ever expect anyone to address me as Rose Cora because that's a mouthful. But my full
Okay.
stage name would be Rose Cora Perry, right? It's
Yeah.
one of those triple names like Neil Patrick Harris, same kind of mentality. But no, Cora is
Yeah.
my middle name, so you don't need to say that when addressing me every time.
Okay, no problem. I love the flow of your name. It's beautiful. It's
Thank
very
you.
melodic.
Indeed,
Yeah, yes, yes. So Rose, I'm excited, so excited to ask this question because we talked about it on the sound check and you said there's going to be a big surprise.
for sure.
So the first question I ask all of my guests is what did little Rose want to be when she grew up?
So, as you had noted, I started actually singing when I was 4. And irrespective of that, my original career aspirations, and this is so Canadian, is that in the winter, I felt it
Mhm.
was really important to be a ski lift attendant because you want to help people successfully get up to the top of the ski hill so that they can plow down and then help them back up. And in the summer, because Canadian summers, especially where I am in southwestern Ontario, it's kind of like we have extreme cold or extreme heat. There's no in between. So in the Canadian summers, I thought it was appropriate to be a Dickie D salesperson so that I could refresh people with delightful ice cream and other treats. So those were my
Oh,
aspirations originally as a child. High hopes,
fantastic.
clearly.
Yes, and did you have these aspirations while you were already involved in music, or is this like a early core memory, like before the age of 4?
This is what my parents have told me, so I can't actually confirm or deny either suspicion. But this is what was relayed to me as a funny story from my mom that that's what I said I wanted to be when I grew up. So I have no idea
Right.
in terms of the timeline of that. But I was enrolled basically in classical vocal studies when I was 4. So I'm assuming at some point, as a very very early infant, I kind of demonstrated to my parents I had some sort of musicality or at least a desire for showmanship because they spent a lot of money and many years having me diligently attend vocal lessons.
Yes. Wow. So I was telling you in the sound check, I listened to a couple of your past interviews and I was very fascinated to learn that your parents are actually not musically inclined.
No.
And this is not something you grew up with, which is at, at your age to have started at 4, that's typically a story where parents are in music. It's just, they get the kids into it. So tell us a little bit about that, how your parents discovered this in you and decided to support you.
So I will give my parents that something that I really, really admire about, and of course, as a child, you never appreciate these things, but retrospectively looking back as an adult, I really respect and appreciate the fact that they wanted to raise me as well as my brother with a very well-rounded kind of experience, whether it be artistic evolution or cultural experiences or having us engaged in different hobbies so that we could really truly find ourselves and find our passion in life. So in terms of kind of early childhood memories, it wasn't merely just music. I was also enrolled in karate, so I have my black belt in Shorin Ryu karate. I did competitive kickboxing. I also was on a professional ski racing team. I played volleyball. I did basketball. I did visual arts as well. So I was into painting and sketching. The music thing is what stuck, right? So the reality is that my parents, as I said, in an effort to make both my brother and myself very well rounded and expose us to different things so we could really find who we were. They had us involved in basically every extracurricular activity under the sun you can think of. And just for whatever reason, I took to music and singing, and it just resonated with me even as an early infant. And my first performance publicly was at the age of 4, and I sang Castle on a Cloud from Les Mis. And then I ended up penning my very first song at age 7. And hilariously enough, again, I didn't know in retrospect that I would become a vegan as an adult, but it was all about environmentalism and trying to save the world from oil spills. So, yeah, it's interesting
Oh,
how those
great.
things work out.
Yeah. Do you actually have a recording of you singing
No
your
one will
first
ever
song?
hear it. There was like 5 different key changes and tempo changes. It was so lofty and ambitious for a 7-year-old. And at that point, I hadn't found an instrument that really connected with me either. So I've always been a singer, so to speak, and I tried a bunch of different instruments. Like I am a terrible, and I have no qualms about saying this, terrible violin player, terrible viola player. I tried the cello, it didn't do it for me. I've dabbled with a little bass. You know, if the mood strikes, I'll still play a bass upon occasion, but guitar is
Yeah.
really what just kind of allowed me to hone my songwriting and really find myself more in that regard, because I knew I always wanted to be a singer, but I needed to find an instrument that I could use as suitable accompaniment to back up what I was doing and to help me kind of figure out the structures of songs. And so despite the fact that I'm classically trained as a vocalist, I have no training whatsoever as a guitarist. I've actually invented my own tablature because I taught myself how to play. So it's this very, very bizarre non-musical family, non-musical story. Like my mom is a professional fitness trainer. She's beautiful, in phenomenal shape, way better than me.
Wow.
And my father is a life insurance agent. And both of my parents are actually ridiculously athletic. So my dad is an 11-time Canadian powerlifting champion, 2-time world champion. My mom was also a competitive bodybuilder. So I come from like this ridiculously athletic background. So that would have made more sense. But no, I'm this weird artistic musician. So I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
something skipped generations.
yeah. Wow. And I also think it's so interesting that you didn't sort of start in the rock and roll genre.
Not at all. No.
You know? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, and why were you passionate about the music that you were practicing back then?
Sure. So, I mean, as I was a child, I think it goes without saying, if you want to become, well-rounded in your craft, it's good to be exposed to different kind of things. And I think that same philosophy kind of applies to musicality as well, right? So my parents wanted me to have a solid foundation as a musician if I did end up finding this to be a passion that I'd pursue, which I did. And so doing the classical training really allows you to hone your craft, expand your range, get to know what you're capable of, really challenges you in that capacity. And it requires a lot of discipline too, because when you're singing classical music, it's not like rock, which is all really about artistic interpretation and energy and aggression and, just allowing the dynamics to kind of interpret the song for you. Classical is literally you sing the notes as they are written on the page because Beethoven
Yes.
knew what the hell he was talking about and you are not deviating from that. So I think
Yeah.
having that discipline, even though as a teenager, I kind of experimented too, going into like heavier rock stuff and doing some screaming and stuff. I remember my mom saying, "Oh, you're going to ruin your voice." I didn't, but having that foundation and that background, I think, is really important because, as I said, it's allowed me to sort of grow and really test the waters and figure out where I wanted to go musically. As far as where the rock influence came from, 100% undeniably my father. We used to go on these fishing trips when I was younger. We have a cottage out in Turkey Point on Lake Erie. And we
Yeah.
would blare Metallica's Black Album and Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet to the point that all the other people in fishing boats would be extremely irritated because all the fish, I'm sure, were attracted to our boat because of the vibrations of the music. So we're reeling them in like crazy. No one else is catching anything. And we had rock music cranked, completely ruining, sort of the serenity experience of being out on the lake. So 100% my dad is to blame for the rock. And if he doesn't understand why I'm a rock musician, I don't know what to tell you. It's entirely on him.
That's great. I never knew Metallica could get you the Lake Erie perch.
Heck yeah.
Perfect.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And the small and big and largemouth bass for sure.
Yes. Oh, that's great. So your dad was always more the rock and roll guy out of the
For
two
sure.
of them.
For sure.
Yeah. So is there sort of a band from that time that really resonates with you, Rose, like that you just love, that maybe makes you think about your dad? I know you're talking about Metallica, Bon Jovi, but is there one that's like specifically a classic rock band that you just love
Well, I mean,
to
I love
have?
a lot of classic rock, admittedly,
Yeah.
and I'm also a 90s kid, right? So, I mean, grunge,
Yeah.
alternative, oh, that speaks to my
Oh,
soul in a
yeah.
way I can't even begin to articulate. In terms of classic rock bands, though, um, I would probably say the top three, and these would be because these are concerts that I physically attended with my father, would be
Yeah.
AC/DC, Aerosmith, and Bon Jovi. And hilariously enough, I remember when I went to the AC/DC concert with my father and my brother, my dad was so tired from driving because I think it was somewhere in the States. It was probably Detroit or something. It was a really, really long day. And I mean, he works hard. He's an older fellow. I get it. He ended up falling asleep at one point. My brother got so mad. He's like, how can you fall asleep during AC/DC? This is like one of the world's greatest bands. And there's this huge thing. But then when my dad finally did wake up and actually enjoy the concert, I remember he turned to me and said that he did not believe Angus Young was actually a person and was fairly convinced that he was an alien because of how he played guitar. And I'm like, I wouldn't blame you. He's phenomenal. So probably AC/DC because of the hysterical story associated with it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's so nice when you can, like, music ties to so many things, but I asked you that specifically because I think it's so great when you have a parent that's influenced you and then you have this like sort of attachment, like that will forever be your kind of your band with your dad, right? Which is
100%
really
for sure.
nice.
And I mean, that's not to
Yeah.
say that my mom doesn't have great taste in music too, but in a very different capacity. Because again, as a fitness trainer, obviously, I mean, you can't be getting people really excited and doing cardio if they're listening to
Yeah.
something that's not really super up tempo. So she listened to a lot of pop. And so as a consequence of growing up with that influence too, I mean, that got me into like old school Michael Jackson and Madonna. And I also love bands like Jamiroquai, and that's entirely from
Oh,
my mom. And then she's
yeah.
a diehard Beatles fan. So anytime her and I are on the road together, I'll put on the Beatles and we'll sing like the whole anthology through. So that's pretty cool too to have that as well.
Oh, amazing. I love that. So the 90s, you were a teenager in the 90s, correct?
I wasn't a teenager,
Or
but I was
okay,
growing up in the
you
90s.
were you were growing up in the 90s. Okay. So yes, I'm very intrigued by all of this because um I want to talk to you obviously about Music Saves. It's just so amazing what you've done. But I'd like to talk to you about your own teenage angst and also sort of what was some of the music that you turned to at that time? What was going on? When did things shift for you where you realize my mental health is, is suffering?
Yeah, and I mean, not to ever take away any seriousness of this, but I obviously
Yeah.
don't want to say all of this with a smiling face. Not that I'm not happy to be here, but I will
Yeah.
say that my teenage years were probably one of the worst times of my life. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I was suicidal. I was at times. I had severe, severe mental illness issues in terms of, body dysmorphia. I suffered from anorexia. I was definitely, I definitely didn't have a lot of friends. At least that's how I felt. I felt that I was bullied fairly mercilessly, and I was picked on a lot because I dared to be different and I dared to not conform. So I was the lone goth chick going to a Catholic prep school. I'm sure you can appreciate that did not
Wow.
go over very well. And it wasn't that I was doing it to, take a stab at anybody else. I was just trying to be myself. I mean, being a teenager, that's kind of the time in your life where you're testing the waters and figuring out who you are, and you're into experimentation, whether that's how you look or trying to figure out, what your preferences are. And I think frankly that needs to be encouraged because those are huge, huge years in your life in terms of influencing your behavior as an adult. So I was really just trying to figure out who I was. And at the time, I felt like this weird little gothic depressed girl, and that's who I was. And so I didn't have a lot of positive outlets in terms of dealing with all these emotions that I was experiencing, and in terms of dealing with this not great experiences that I was having from my peers as well as the teachers at the school. As I said, I got picked on a lot. So
Right.
music basically ended up finding me, and in that capacity. So although I had done this previous singing training, and I had kind of toyed around with writing songs, I wouldn't say I really seriously got indulged in the craft of music until I started going through these mental health crises. And I say music saved me because ultimately it did. Instead of turning to things like drugs and alcohol to cope, because I felt really isolated, alone, and alienated from people. I didn't have any peers that I felt that I could reach out to. I picked up a guitar. I played literally 6 hours a day to the point that my fingers bled. And I got all of those nasty emotions that I was feeling, channeled them into music so that I could not only deal with my own experiences in more of a positive way, that cathartic experience, that being able to get everything that was bottled up out, but also
Mhm.
in hopes that I could help others do the same thing. And I remember, I don't want to get choked up here.
Yeah.
I remember playing some of my earliest songs in my first band, playing to, you know, all ages crowds, and having other teenagers who might have been a couple years younger than me, and my music and my lyrics really resonating with them because they felt the same way that I did. And it was at that
Mm.
point that I realized how powerful music really is.
Yeah, really. And I mean, Rose, like when when we hear about bullying, we kind of like picture kids fighting in the schoolyard and everything, but
No.
it's so much more than that. Like even can you tell us a little bit about your experience with bullying? Like I would imagine it was also happening with teachers, right? Like
So for
people are looking at, yeah.
what I will say, and I don't say this to make any sexist generalizations, it's just at least this was my experience. I think,
Mhm.
especially in the era that I grew up in, bullying for a woman or a girl, as I was at the time, was not so much about physical bullying. It wasn't like I was getting pulled aside and beaten up, but it was psychological warfare, basically. So,
Yeah.
I mean, gossip and rumors being spread about you, saying that, you know, you slept with the entire football team at the school, having people write nasty things on your locker or putting really nasty things on your locker, and then you having to deal with the onslaught of that, having people look at you or treat you differently just because of the way that you looked, and not being willing to express that this is just you expressing your individualization. So I remember, you know, even with teachers, you know, if it was a brand new teacher I'd never had before, just on the basis of my appearance, they'd assume that I was an idiot or a drug addict. And I mean, I still get that sometimes too, because I'm a rock musician. So we're all supposed to be of
Mhm.
a certain type. And I remember them going out of their way to really grill me and pick on me for the first couple of weeks of class until they acknowledge, wow, she actually has a brain. And maybe we shouldn't just, you know, be dedicating all of our questions in sort of a firelight capacity to see if she's paying
Mhm.
attention, because I got straight A's. It's not like I was a troublemaker. I wasn't, you know, doing drugs. I wasn't, you know, trying to start any riots or any fights with anybody. I kept to myself, but because I was different in how I looked and how I expressed myself, that's why I was a target and that's why I was picked on. And I
Mhm.
mean, as I said, gossip might not sound like it's a big deal, but when you're a teenage girl and you are being singled out and you're the only one of your kind, the goth chick at your high school, and you feel like everybody is coming in and just coming up with these rumors and these ideas of who you are, and trying to make your life a living hell, it is extremely destructive on one's psyche. You're like, dude, what did I do to any of you to deserve this? And I mean,
Mhm.
looking back again as an adult, I'm sure the people who had subjected me to these experiences were probably going through some crazy stuff of their own. So no judgment. It's
Mhm.
not like I hold any resent or any hate towards anybody. I just want to kind of go forward and live with peace. And I hope
Yeah.
that they've made peace with, you know, their experiences too. But it was brutal. It was brutal. I remember looking in the mirror and honestly vomiting at my own appearance because I had such self-loathing and self-hatred at that point. So I feel extremely thankful that I was able to find an outlet like music.
Yeah.
And I guess the takeaway from this story is that there is a bright side. I was
Yeah.
able to find an outlet that made sense for me, that worked for me, that allowed me to channel all those negative emotions and get to a place where I'm mentally happy and healthy,
Mhm.
and I'm okay with myself. I mean, I might get
Yeah.
mad if I've got a breakout or if I feel bloated, but it's not like I feel that way about myself anymore. But that took
Yeah.
years of self healing and introspection and just being honest, and being able to honestly get all of that emotion out of me in a really, really healthy way. And being able to know that other people could relate to my experiences too made a huge difference. It didn't make me feel like
Yes.
I was isolated and alone anymore.
Yes. Now, one thing I find so fascinating and so brave is that over those years where you did feel isolated and you felt alone, it sounds to me like you never decided one day, like, okay, I'm gonna ditch the goth look and conform. You
No,
kept doing it.
I did.
Which is amazing. So where did that come from? I mean, that takes a tremendous amount of strength and bravery and for you to be going home at night and having those dark, awful feelings and and having that self-loathing, but still staying true to who you are, that's quite something. So, was there a spark of strength that you were holding with you that whole time that just was it your parents? Like, what was it that kept you going
I
and
think
getting through
I
the
think I
years?
definitely have to give credit to my parents because they're fairly unapologetic in terms of who they are too. And I mean, I admire the hell out of that. Like, I'm not saying correct, I'm not saying it all go out and be an asshole. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying
Right.
if you're confident in who you are and you're happy with who you are and you're sincerely being true to yourself and you're trying to be a good person and you're not wishing any negativity on anybody else, you're just living your life true to who you are intrinsically. I mean, fuck everybody else. Part of my language, but I've kind of always had that mentality. So, and I think I knew on some sort of subconscious level, even though I was a teenager and even though, I was taking out all of this abuse on myself by self-punishment, I think I knew on some sort of level that it wasn't me that was the problem. It was how other people were treating me. And I had a choice in terms of how I could respond to that. And I never responded back with malice or hate or violence. I just kept doing my own thing and wished that it would go away. And I found a way to deal with it. I never made it anybody else's problem because I was still happy with myself, even though I was being treated this way by everybody else. I'm like, I don't know who else I can be other than myself. And I mean, I think everybody's got to ask themselves that same question. If you're living just to try and please everybody else, then who are you? What are you living your life for? I mean, that's not what life is about. That's not to say, as I said, you should go out of your way to be an asshole to people. Absolutely, you shouldn't. But at the same time, I mean, you've got to do what is in your heart and in your soul and be true to who you are. And my parents absolutely raised me to be strong.
Yeah.
Perhaps a little too strong and too assertive at times, but mom didn't raise no fool. What can I say?
Yeah. God, well, it really, really impresses me because I'm telling you, Rose, there's a lot of us who, we figure this stuff out in our 40s and 50s because a lot of women are raised as people pleasers. I mean, a lot of men are as well. Like, be good, do it. So for hearing that and hearing your struggle, but that you stayed true to yourself, it's just astonishing. I think it's fantastic. And so the Music Saves organization you've created
Mhm.
was inspired by your own experience.
For sure.
And tell us about the foundation and how it works.
Yeah, so I started the foundation basically as kind of a platform that I can take part in different events, trying to spread a positive message on mental health and positive coping strategies. So as a consequence of being involved in that, I've done guest MC work. I've been heavily involved in London's own Defeat Depression campaign as their ongoing MC for all the live events that they've had. I've also been involved in two really phenomenal concerts that are suicide prevention and suicide awareness raising concerts. One's called Caner Fest in Windsor. One's called Strummer Fest. It's in the KW area. I do those on an annual basis with my band because, again, I think it's just really, really important for people to know, number one, there's no shame in having dark times in your lives. We all do, whether or not we publicly talk about it, but these are really real lived experiences that many people have. So do not feel shamed about that and do not feel like there's a stigma associated with that. Number two, these events are really important because it allows people to become aware of resources to help them that they may or may not have been aware of. But number three, I think the most important reason that these events are important is because it allows people to connect in a really real, tangible way, knowing that they're not alone in their experiences. Because 100%, that was kind of the downfall for me, feeling really alienated and isolated as a young girl. I didn't feel I had anyone to turn to. And whether or not those resources existed, they certainly were not on, the top of mind for me as a teenager, right? So I think having that connection with people and, making people aware that these resources are available and making them aware that other people, hey, we get what you're doing and we get what you're going through and we understand is why these events are so important. So because of my foundation, I've been able to make associations with those. And I'm really happy that I've been able to do that because I think increasingly over the past couple of years, it's really come to the forefront just how many people truly are affected and afflicted in a variety of ways by mental illness, and how it can be just as debilitating and severe as a physical ailment or a physical disease. So I'm glad that that's getting more attention in the public's eye, and people are acknowledging, hey, mental health, mental illness, like, let's talk about this. Let's have conversations.
Yeah.
Let's be really real and authentic with people, and let's provide people with the resources and support that they need.
Great. I would love to know, Rose, as go on this journey, especially with the mental health being like in the forefront. Have there been fans who have come forward and talked to you about your song lyrics and how they've affected them? Or is there
Absolutely.
anything you want to share that was like particularly special to you? And if it makes you cry, it's okay.
So
I
I don't
love a
want to cry.
cry.
You ruined my makeup. I don't have the waterproof
I
mascara
will,
on today.
I will cry with you.
Um, so I always this one story. It's from many years ago, but it always stuck out with me. So back in my anti-hero days, so that was my band that was signed to the major label. I'd written a song called "Unpretty," and it was all about feeling self-conscious and like I was not achieving the typical standards of beauty and what society prescribes as kind of the singular vision of beauty. That's usually being the buxom blonde, and no offense to blondes, but that's
Yeah.
typically kind of the figurehead for what is considered beautiful in society. And I'm obviously the antithesis of that, as a pencil-shaped, dark-haired Italian woman who's very small in every capacity. That is not me. So I remember having one of my male fans actually come up to me and saying that the song really resonated with him, which I thought was interesting, because obviously written from a very female perspective, talking about beauty standards. Not that I was ever trying to alienate my male audience, but I wouldn't have thought that lyrically that song would have resonated with a male. So I thought it was pretty darn cool that it did. More recently, I had a friend who got terribly, terribly, terribly stricken with COVID, and it really, really left him debilitated in a lot of ways. My heart goes out to him. I am totally going to cry. When he said he listened to "Not My Time," which is our new single, he said, "You're damn right, it's not my time." And I said, "No, it's not."
Oh, wonderful. Wow. That I love that. Two men, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so great. Yeah. You know, um, we were talking about this a little bit before too, Rose, but like the feminine energy, it's so magical, and I think it's really great when men can relate to us in a
For
way that
sure.
we never expected. And in one of your interviews, you were talking about being a Leo. Your birthday's August the 10th, right?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
Yes, and I'm August the 20th.
Nice.
And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, like you know, some people believe, some people don't, but I mean, the whole thing about the whole Leo thing. It's all about the hair, and it's all about the shining a light on and showing people, like what they're capable of. And, you getting up on stage and just doing your thing and harnessing your power. Like to me, that's like such a Leo
Oh,
thing. But
100%.
I think totally, but I think the other really cool thing about it is that, Leos are very protective over their cubs too,
Oh,
right?
heck
We
yeah.
like to, yeah, we like to protect our friends, our family, like, um, and it's interesting how the fans are now, these are your cubs, like, and all these people that you are helping. I think when you're up there performing, even in your videos, you can see it. Like you just have this, like, it's this vibration of inclusion. Like, I want everybody to hear what I have to say. I want everybody to know about it. And I want everybody to be a phoenix rising from the ashes, because we're all doing this together.
Heck
Right.
yeah.
So you're a very powerful Leo, is what
Well,
I'm trying
thank
to
you.
say. Yeah.
I try. I might be small, but I'm mighty, damn it.
You are mighty, totally. And I think it's really interesting how you were in this band, and the band was sort of climbing, 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 and you decided, nope, I'm gonna break out and do my own thing.
So that's
And
that's not the full story.
okay,
It was not just based off of a decision to go solo because I have some sort of massive ego that can't fit through a doorway. That's not the reality. The reality is
okay.
I dearly loved being an anti-hero. I'm tremendously proud of what we were able to accomplish. I have some
Mhm.
hilarious and not so hilarious memories from that time in my life. Why the
Yeah.
band fell apart, truthfully, is that unfortunately some of my bandmates felt that the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle was more important than the music. And I
Mm.
have no qualms in saying that I'm a hardcore straight edge and I have no place for drugs in my life. I don't care what people do, in their own personal time, but when it starts to interfere with us as a band, as a working business, as a project, and it starts to interfere with people's relationships and how they treat one another, that's unacceptable. So, I mean, I know a lot of people try to minimize, their behavior if they're intoxicated or they're high, saying, "Oh, well, it was just this or just that." That doesn't make it okay. And I certainly don't stand for myself being treated that way, nor people that I care about. So, unfortunately, it kind of imploded, as these things often do happen in the music industry, especially the rock scene, where drugs run rampant and people like me who don't even drink caffeine are so rare it's almost beyond people's comprehension at times. But the truth is I just didn't want association with that kind of stuff, so it just sort of fell apart, and then that became the springboard for me to launch into experimenting as a solo artist and kind of trying to refine my footing after being in that former project. So
Yeah, that's great. And the drugs and the alcohol and everything. It is so amazing, Rose, how these things are so glamorized. And even, you go on Instagram and it's like mummies drinking wine to cope with their kids and it's all laughed off. And
right.
I'm like, seriously? Like this is not healthy. And same with your industry. It's like the whole idea that all over all of these years you have musicians like Elvis Presley and Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, and you look at a guy like Elvis. He had this horrible death because he was basically a machine that had to keep running to pay all the paychecks, so
Yeah.
just keep pumping him with stuff to keep him going, and that's not what music is about.
Well, and it's
Music is
normalized too,
yeah,
right? Like that's the other thing.
yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, another rock star died of an overdose. Oh well, on to the next one. And
Mhm.
there's no pause, there's no acknowledgement about how devastating that is, because dying of a drug overdose is preventable. It's not like we're
Mhm.
talking about the person dying of, some sort of chronic disease that got the best of them. We're talking about
Yeah.
them dying because of a bad life choice. And I'm sorry if I'm harping on this a little too much, but when you know people in your own personal circle that have died from overdosing from drugs, or they felt like they had to turn to drugs to cope, and you know that those are choices that could have been prevented, it's devastating when you see society just minimizing, glamorizing, or encouraging this kind of behavior as, normal. Hey, every weekend, let's just get high because we hate our lives so much. Well, how about instead, if you're so dissatisfied and there's something going on, why don't you explore that? Why don't you find the help that you need? Why don't you find a healthy outlet to deal with it? I mean, there
Mhm.
are other options. Why do we just keep saying, oh yeah, let's get drunk, let's get high on the weekend, and that's just totally normal, and then that's what you need to do to be cool and to fit in? Well, again, to that I say, fuck that. No, you don't.
Yeah. Good. Good. It's true. Or you look at people like they can't wait to get away and go up north, go to the cottage, get away from it all. And then here you are in nature in this beautiful scenery where everything is there to heal you,
Yeah,
right? If you just sit in it. But
they're
everybody
scrolling on
does
their
the same
phone.
thing. Yeah, they crack the beers, they
Yeah,
take the gummies, whatever, like and here you are in nature, like the most healing place, but we don't think about that, and it's because we have been programmed this way, right? And
100%.
so I love what you're doing and you're bringing attention to it, and it's an industry problem too, because guys like Prince, like they were given drugs to have a little bit of this, have a little bit of this to keep going, like this is what
Yeah,
you got to do if you want to work in this industry. And it didn't have to be that way. Tour dates didn't have to happen the way they happened. We could have, done a tour over 2 years instead of over, 6 months or whatever it was. Like,
Well, it's all about
yeah,
the money, right? And unfortunately,
yeah,
when money and greed and that kind of thinking takes over, health and what is positive and what are productive ways of dealing with things kind of all go out the window. So I think
mhm,
everybody needs to ask themselves the bigger question is what is actually driving and motivating you in life?
yeah. Yes, that's a great question. So now that you're back out on tour again,
Not yet. It's winter time in Canada. I'm
it's
staying
winter.
inside by my fire with my cat with copious amounts of
Perfect.
cuddling. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I love it. That's great. So that's how you were touring in the fall, right? So you wrapped it all up just before Christmas?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
usually kind of relegate our late spring, early summer, early fall for touring, just because
Yeah.
seasonality speaking, that's when most people want to be out as well. I mean, not just from a music
Yeah.
stance, like playing when you have frozen fingers on a guitar is next to impossible, but
Yeah.
from a patron or audience stance, I'm sure they don't want to be sitting there chattering their teeth either. Like that's just not fun. So let's wait till it's warm and beautiful outside and we can all be happy
Yeah.
because the weather is fresh and nice, fresh air to breathe in and just have that beautiful communal experience.
Yeah, I think that's great. So your latest single, Rose, you have to tell us all about that
Okay.
and the inspiration for the song.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
So we had just released it at the end of November, so we're still doing tremendously well with it. It's gotten picked up by over 40 stations across Canada and the U.S., which and a couple in Portugal too. Awesome! Hey, my
Oh,
Portuguese
good.
friends, that's very cool. And we've gotten almost 20,000 views on the video too in the past couple of months, which is phenomenal. So really, really excited and just thankful to everybody for tuning in and checking it out and for their support with this because this meant a lot. Coming back after basically 2 years of nothingness and wondering if anybody would care, truthfully, because like every other band and every other kind of person engaged in the musical and the artistic capacity, we haven't been able to do anything because of the pandemic. So
Mhm.
2020 obviously was a year of nothingness where everybody was kind of locked in their houses and terrified, and rightfully so. No judgment there, but nothing happened. Unfortunately, my brother passed away at the end of 2020. So my parents and myself were dealing with a lot of grief throughout 2021. So wasn't really active, and there was still a lot of restrictions kind of going on and off, on and off. So kind of taking a well-deserved mental break for myself in that capacity. I needed to focus on things that were more important than music, and that would be family.
Mhm.
2022, last year, finally we're able to come back. We played a whopping 6 shows and it was the best feeling in the world. And I don't
Oh,
care, it's not like these were major events, but it was just so wonderful to be able to be back out there
yes.
connecting with people. So the impetus
Right.
behind Not My Time and the story and what kind of inspired it is I legitimately contracted COVID myself. I'm thankful that I did not end up hospitalized or having more severe outcomes, which many people unfortunately have had. I definitely had a battle for a couple of weeks and I was pretty scared at times. And I don't know if I was scared because of just the symptoms that I was feeling, but also because of psychologically everything that's sort of been rammed down our throats for the past couple of years, all the fear tactics, all the stories and all the headlines that we've heard. And there's been so much divisiveness between people in terms of how things have been dealt with and whether the mandates are appropriate, whether the vaccines are appropriate, whether the
Mhm.
masking is appropriate. And I just felt like there's been so much fighting instead of acknowledgement that, hey, we are all collectively as a world right now going through
Yeah.
a really hard time. Can we just like take a step back, stop fighting with each other and acknowledge this kind of shared plight and come together? So I
Yeah.
wrote the song for a couple of reasons. As with everything that I write, it was inspired firsthand by something that I went through. It's not my time to die. Fucking hell, it's not.
Yes.
I was terrified. I was very, very, very ill. I'm thankful that my family and my spouse were there to take care of me and it didn't escalate, but I definitely had to fight through that. Number two,
Mhm.
I want everyone to know that whether we're talking figuratively speaking, as in giving up, or physically speaking, as in, actually passing away. It's not their time either. We need to come together. We need to acknowledge that, man, this has been a hell of a couple of years for us. People have suffered economically, they've suffered mentally, marriages have fallen apart, people have lost their jobs, people have lost their minds, and rightfully so. All these restrictions, all this separation, all this hate mongering and anger that has been just surrounding the internet. And when you're stuck inside and have no way to get out and to be able to deal with any of those things, it's a recipe for disaster. So I hope in releasing this song that people will listen to the lyrics and listen to the message, take a step back, try to acknowledge that anger and acknowledge that, hey, it shouldn't be directed at my fellow neighbor or my friends. In fact, it should be directed at just the situation. And we should acknowledge that we're all in the situation. It's not our time to give up on hope or to give up on each other.
Yeah, beautiful. It's very, very, that's just so true. Wow. When you performed that song for the first time, that must have been quite something, eh?
It was, and it was
Yeah.
terrifying because that was our first gig back after not playing for like 2.5 years. So like, we don't know if we're gonna screw this up. No pressure.
Oh, and Rose, the other thing is you did not do any online performances
I refuse.
during
Yeah.
Can you touch on that? I think this is just awesome.
Well, I mean, to me, why I'm a musician is, obviously a couple reasons. I'm a musician for personal reasons, because when I'm feeling down, these crazy songs come into my head and I don't know how to turn off that ability. It's kind of just with me, whether I like it or not. But it's proven to be helpful as far as dealing with emotional situations. So I'm thankful for my gift. But I'm also a musician because I see it as a powerful way to connect with people and to make them feel heard and understood. I know that growing up, when I listened to my favorite bands, especially if I was in a really, really angry mood, I mean, listening to some Courtney Love, hell yeah, girl. I understand exactly everything that you're feeling, and I want to scream along too. Or listening to, Veruca Salt and understanding the depth and the darkness and kind of the minor harmonies of their songs and how that makes me feel on, a really, really emotional level and a subconscious level almost. I know that having that experience for myself has helped me get through a lot of things that I was going through, so I talked about feeling very isolated, especially as a kid. So listening to music and writing music became really powerful for me, because if I could hear somebody else's lyrics and it felt like they were speaking to me, it's like, wow, this is so cool. I can do this for other people too. So that's always sort of been my goal, to be able to share that beautiful gift with other people the same way that my favorite musicians have been able to do that for me. So understanding and trying to write in a very relatable and a very, very real way based off of my own experiences. That's not to say that I don't write some pretty love ditties, of course, because that's still a universal human experience too. But I also like to get into, the social issues territory as well. Might ruffle some feathers because I've never been good at keeping my mouth shut, obviously. But I do think it's important that we have dialogue about these things and people feel like, hey, you might be using your inside voice right now, but your views are acknowledged. They are valid. They are legitimate. And I mean, if they can hear that in my lyrics, they can feel a little piece of themselves being expressed. Well, that's truly all an artist could ever ask for.
Yeah, great. I love it. I don't know if you find this sometimes, but I'll hear a song and it might be a song that I've heard, growing up, and it was always playing, and it was like, okay, this song's okay, whatever. And then one day you hear the song and you go, oh my God, I get it now. And then all of a sudden it's your favorite song. And that's such a wonderful thing about music, how it can, it shows up when you need it,
100 million times. And I mean, there's also at different times in your life, a song can mean different things too, right? You might really, really love a song for perhaps more superficial reasons when you're younger. It's like, well, it's got a good melody and it's easy to dance to. And then as you get older, you listen back and you're like, holy crap, this song speaks to me in ways I didn't even acknowledge. And then a couple years later, you listen to the same song again and you're like, man, I just love melodically, what that guitar riff or that vocal line, how that just
Mhm.
makes me feel on an emotional level that I can't even articulate. So music can impact people in so many wonderful ways. And it's not just the lyrics, it's also the feeling, the construction of the piece of art, right? I mean, it's the same
Yes.
thing as looking at a painting. People get
Yeah.
different things out of those things, and everybody's experience with music is entirely subjective, so there's no right or wrong way to digest it or interpret it or to experience it, right? If somebody just
Right.
likes my music because they're like, oh, it's pretty melodies, I like her voice, cool. If somebody
Yeah.
listens to the lyrics and like, fuck yeah, man, I like what this woman has to say, she doesn't hold back,
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, if somebody really likes the heavy distortion or the heavy drums that Tyler does, very cool too. I don't
Yeah.
care. I mean, it's not my place to tell you how to enjoy that experience. As I said, it's an individualistic, subjective kind of thing, but we can experience it on so many different levels. And I think the greatest thing about music is that it just has this ability to be able to break down barriers of difference. So you can go to a concert, a band is playing, you've got the crowd full of, every single different kind of person you can think of, whether we're talking gender or race or religion or social economic status, whatever.
Mhm.
And they all come together and they're all singing along
Yeah.
the chorus with that artist. It's like in that moment, everything else, all the bullshit of the world is gone. Nothing else matters other than
Yeah.
coming together and just having that beautiful emotional experience together. And that is why I don't do a live stream. To take it back to your question,
Yes.
you cannot
Right.
get that on the internet.
No, you cannot get that on the internet. That's
No.
so true. It's so true. You brought up so many good points there. And um, even when you think of like, I remember going to see Tears for Fears, and I was like recently, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys wrote these songs when they were 20, and now they make sense. It like
Right.
now that I'm over 50, they make sense. And so when you look back on all of the songs you've written over the years, is there a song where you're like, I wrote that as a young person, but now it's, is it still relevant today? Or do you find it hard to listen to the older things you've written? Or do you find that are they still important to you? Like, how does it sound to hear your own sort of, experiences in your music?
Well, I think it goes without saying. I would like to think on some sort of capacity I have matured and I'm now adulting properly, so to speak. But I
Mm,
think it goes without saying that as these pieces of art physically manifested from me, that there's a little piece of me in each and every one of those, whether, it was written
mhm.
10, 15 years ago versus written yesterday. It's not like a piece of me no longer exists in that music, right? It came from an experience that was very, very real to me at the time, whether or not I still have as much importance on that experience, and it's not weighing me down necessarily as much emotionally now as it was when I originally wrote it, but it's still a piece
Mhm.
of who I am. It's still a part of myself. A part of me is left in every single one of the songs that I've written. So I don't think it's fair to say that I don't relate to any of them anymore. I think
Mhm.
it's a different aspect of myself. Even if it's something way back in the crevices of my mind, it's still something that came from a really real experience. And it doesn't matter. I mean, if it was written when I was 18 versus, in my 20s, if it still makes sense to somebody and it still resonates with them, that's all that matters, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found it fascinating with musicians, where like for instance, for me, I'll journal things. So if I look back at a journal that I had when I was 18 going through a tough time in high school, I'll
Yep, of
read it and I'll my stomach will start to turn a bit. I'll be like,
course.
"Oh my God. Oh." And I just put it away. It's not that I want to block it out, but I don't know if I necessarily want to go there
Relive
again.
that.
It's a trigger.
Yep.
So for you, do you find that some of these songs are also triggers where some nights it's hard to sing them, you know?
Yes, but not necessarily in a bad way, because I think that the more that I live that experience for myself and I'm honest and upfront about it, the more it allows me to be able to emotionally grow from it and to be able to
Mhm.
handle it and cope with it. So I wrote a song called Darkest Days. It's on our band's most recent EP from 2019. It was actually re-recorded. It was originally a solo song, but we wanted to revamp it and make it a hard rock and banger. And it
Mhm.
is entirely about the struggles that I had as a teenager with mental health and with mental illness. and dealing with depression and all that. It's a very, the name Darkest Days is not a misnomer. It is a dark song lyrically. If you listen to it,
Yeah.
it's really about not feeling entirely like you should move on with your life, and not being sure if there's a point, and, you know, trying to find that little light at the end of the tunnel, and then the hope to be able to keep going. So it came from a very, very dark place. And so it does actually, I have to try not to get choked up when I play it sometimes live, but at the same time, by forcing myself to acknowledge those experiences and to acknowledge those feelings as very real and very authentic, it allows me to come to better grips with that, to be able to move forward and to grow from that experience. So I think that's the thing. I think that as a society, and no judgment, but as a society, it's a lot easier to just kind of get drunk and forget about your problems. Write it in a journal, tuck that away, and never look at it again, as opposed to confront things head on, acknowledge them for what they are, acknowledge the situation for what it is, try to actually learn about yourself and learn how to grow from that situation. I mean, we all have terrible things that we have to go through. It doesn't matter if you're a millionaire. It doesn't matter if, you know, you come from a lower strata of society. We all have different demons that we have to bear, and emotional baggage, like none of us are unscathed. It's just all in how we deal and how we cope with those things, and how in turn we treat others as a consequence of those experiences. So I think it's really important to take any bad experience that you've gone through and try to see it as a learning opportunity, and acknowledge that, yeah, this sucks. There's nothing wrong with saying that. And yeah, that was a challenge, or that was a really, really bad time. But what did that teach me about myself? How can I learn from this? How can I become stronger? And how can I try and bring more goodness out of this to others as a consequence? Because I think internally, at least I hope, that none of us go out of our way to be jerks to each other just for the fun of it. I think that anybody that does behave that way usually probably has something that they haven't dealt with just yet in their life, and they probably should.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Rose, I love it. I'm so inspired. This is good. So we have some fans here that are doing little shout outs that I wanted to read to you.
Oh, nice.
So Daniel Rudbull, listening and sharing from London, Ontario. Kelly Mercer, hi from London, Ontario. Woo!
Nice.
Che Trudgeon said you're an avid axe thrower as well.
That is true. Shay would know, especially with the big axe. Thank you, Shay, for letting everyone know about my secret talents.
Oh my God, we may have to elaborate on that. Okay, Michael RMJ, well, it says hello from Germany.
Hey, Michael.
John Paul Zammit, hello from Hamilton, Ontario.
Yes, I love the hammer.
Yes, and Sharon Langford says inner strength and being unapologetic about who you are is everything. Inspiring.
100 freaking million times over. Yes.
Yes. And we got Tracy from Windsor who just chimed in now too. So
hey, Tracy,
this
thank
is
you
great.
For joining.
Yeah. And Peter J. Perry says incredible.
Well, that's my father. What is he going to say? I didn't pay him to be here.
Oh, that's great. We'll see your dad at the next AC/DC concert.
Yes. Sure. Heck yeah. You better not fall asleep this time.
Oh, it's so great. Rose, I'm so grateful that you took the time today to talk to us and share all of your wisdom. And you're truly an incredible human, and you're a trailblazer. You've just proven that no matter what's going on in life, that it all goes back to staying true to who you are, and it does work out in the end,
Yeah.
Never deviate from that.
Well, if you're still in the muck, then you haven't quite gotten through the muck, but that's okay. There will be an opportunity to get those hip waders off, to have a nice shower, to get spritzed up at the end of it. You just have to get through the muck first. And I know that's the toughest part. So as my dad would say, you just say, fuck it. I'm going to do it.
Yes, that's an excellent motto. And so, Rose, if people want to get to know your music, maybe that haven't heard of you before, how can they do that? And when will you start touring again?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So the
yeah.
best place to find out kind of everything about me is my official website. So I think my name shows up on the screen on your end. So
Yes, it does. Yeah.
yeah, so Rose like the flower, Cora, Cora, and then Perry like Joe Perry from Aerosmith.com. So rosecoraperry.com. And then from there, all my social media is linked, and you're welcome to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, any of those awesome things. And I try my best to get back to anybody who comments or sends me a message, because I really appreciate everyone taking the time and supporting the little indie truck that could from London, Ontario, Canada. And as for touring plans, we'll have to see. You'll have
Yeah.
to just keep an ear and an eye out for that. We will make announcements as we have them.
Excellent. Okay, we'll look out for that. Thank you so much, Rose.
No, thank
I'm going
you.
to put you, no problem. And I'm just going to put you back in the virtual green room. There's green juice back there for you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Oh, Rose was such a delight to speak with. She's amazing. Such a great source of energy and positivity. We need more of that in this world. So thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you back here again next week with another awesome guest. And if you feel like doing some shopping today, be sure to check out our show sponsor, brendabadome.com. Use the coupon code Get to Know Them for 22% off of your order. And then head on over to my website, glamjewels, GLAMJULZ.com, and pick up some matching accessories. You guys have been a delight. Thank you so much. Keep on showing the world your sparkle, and I will see you back here next week. Bye for now.